Frozen alien dragon family begged the human foreman for shelter. Then something incredible happened. The wind screamed like a wild beast. Ice cut through the air like sharp blades. The frozen planet of Karen 7 was no place for the weak. Through the deadly storm, a creature crawled, an alien dragon mother, her large wings torn and frozen. Her scales were cracked. Blood turned to ice on her legs. Behind her, 3 small dragonlings followed, shivering, falling, crying softly. She whispered, "Hold on, little ones, just a little more." Ahead of them stood a human mining outpost. Tall metal towers, chimneys spitting heat into the frozen sky. The smell of burning fuel and machine oil filled the air. Inside the base, human workers were finishing their long shift. Foreman Rick, a strong man in his late 30s with a worn face and kind eyes, was drinking hot coffee near the security window. Suddenly, an alarm beeped. Motion detected something large was outside the perimeter. Again? Rick sighed. Another snow beast? He checked the screen and froze. A dragon. With children. Rick had seen dragons before. Most were wild, dangerous, hunted. But this one? She was limping. She looked desperate. Rick grabbed his coat and rushed outside, ignoring the guards yelling behind him. The cold punched him hard, but he pushed forward. He saw the dragon collapse just 20 meters from the gates. Her head bowed low. The dragonlings huddled under her wings, crying softly. Rick stopped. She looked up at him. Her voice was dry, broken, but clear. "Please, help us. My children are dying." Rick stared at her. Was this a trick? Was this some trap? But then, one of the babies coughed. A tiny spark of blue fire came from its mouth and quickly died in the wind. Its body trembled. The mother curled her wing tighter over them. Rick's instinct screamed to turn back, but something in his heart told him otherwise. He tapped his communicator. "Open the gate, now." "Are you crazy? That's a dragon." I said, "Open the damn gate." The heavy metal doors groaned open. Rick stepped forward and reached out his hand. The mother dragon slowly stood. Her legs shook. Carefully, she walked with her children into the human outpost. Inside, chaos exploded. Guards aimed guns. Alarms blared. Lights turned red. "Stand down," Rick shouted. "They're not attacking." The dragon mother lowered her head and spread her wings to shield her children. "I beg you," she said softly. "We only need warmth. I will not harm you." "She's speaking English," someone whispered. Rick stepped between her and the guards. "Turn off the alarms. She's a refugee, not a monster." The captain of security, a tall man with cold eyes, argued. "This is against protocol. Alien dragons are dangerous. One breath of fire, and we're all dead." Rick pointed to the eye. "Dragonlings. They're freezing. They'll die in minutes. Is that what we are now? Cold enough to let children die in front of us?" Silence filled the room. Then Rick turned to the dragon. "Follow me." He led them into the engine hall, the warmest place in the colony. The heating vents blasted hot air. Metal floors steamed from the heat. The dragon mother lay down carefully. Her children crawled into her arms, breathing slowly. One of them looked up at Rick and blinked. Its eyes were glowing like soft sapphires. Rick sat down on a toolbox nearby, watching them closely. The dragon mother whispered, "I am called Syrixa. We came from the North Mountains. Hunters destroyed our cave. They hunt us for sport." Rick's eyes darkened. "Who hunts you?" She looked at him. "Your kind calls them the Thraxians. They use our heads as trophies." Rick clenched, his fists. "Yeah, I've heard of them, bastards." Syrixa's voice grew weaker. "They will follow us. If they find us here, you and your people will be in danger." Rick nodded slowly. "We'll deal with that when the time comes." He stood up. "Right now," he said, "you and your children are safe. This is my colony, and I won't let anyone die on my watch. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside the human base, something new had begun. A fragile trust between two enemies who had once feared each other. Neither knew that this one act of kindness would soon lead to something much bigger. Something incredible. Inside the warm engine hall, the air felt thick, not just with heat but with fear, curiosity, and something else no one could explain. The alien dragonlings slept close to their mother, wrapped under her giant wings. Their scales shimmered with frost that slowly melted, leaving behind soft steam. Some workers peeked in from the doorways, whispering and pointing, but Rick just sat near the toolbox, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the strange family. Then, without warning, one of the dragonlings started to shake. Its tiny body twitched and a soft whine came from its throat. Rick stood up. "Hey, something's wrong." Syrixa opened one tired eye. "No, not wrong. He's waking." Waking? He was already awake. Suddenly, the baby dragon's mouth opened wide. A flash of bright blue flame shot out and hit a metal crate. Nearby. Boom! The crate exploded. Workers screamed and ducked. The fire didn't burn red. It was cold fire, glowing blue and white like ice turned to lightning. Rick grabbed a fire blanket, but Syrixa raised her claw. "No, don't touch him. He's on fire." Syrixa stood up, weak but steady. "That is not normal fire. That is the cryoflame. It chooses only 1 in 1,000. Everyone froze. Rick blinked. "What do you mean?" She looked at her son, who now stared at Rick with glowing blue eyes. "It means," she said softly, "he is more than a child. He is a key." "A key to what?" Rick asked. But before she could answer, another alarm rang. Motion detected. Rick's communicator buzzed. "Boss, there's something outside. Multiple heat signals moving fast." Syrix's head turned quickly toward the sound. "They're here," she whispered. "The Thraxians have found us." Outside the gates, figures moved like shadows through the snowstorm. Not beasts, not machines. Hunters. The Thraxians were tall, armored creatures with glowing green eyes and long spears that pulsed with electricity. They had no mercy, and they knew dragons well. Inside, panic spread. "We should give them the dragons," said the head of security. "It's not our fight." Rick turned slowly to face him. "You're a coward." "This is a mining colony, Rick, not a war zone. These are children. They're not human." Rick didn't say a word. Instead, he walked back to the dragonling that had breathed fire. It looked up at him again. Its body shook, but it wasn't from fear. It was responding to him. Syrixa saw it too. Her eyes widened. "No," she breathed. "It cannot be." "What?" "He recognizes your soul, your fire." Rick frowned. "I don't know what that means." "You touched him with kindness when all others feared." "The cryoflame. It is not just a weapon. It is a bond." Rick didn't understand the words, but he felt something deep in his chest. Like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Then the base lights flickered. The outer gates shook. Boom. 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 The Thraxians were trying to break in. Rick turned to the rest of the crew. "Get the kids inside the bunker. Power up the heating vents. Lock down every hallway." "What about you?" someone asked. "I'll stay here," Rick said. "With them." "With the dragons?" "Yes," he said. "Because right now they're the only fire we've got left." Outside, the storm screamed louder. But inside the hall, fire and ice mixed. A new kind of bond was forming. Not between soldier and weapon, but between man and dragon. Something the galaxy hadn't seen in 1,000 years. Something that would soon shake the stars. The storm had slowed, but inside the human colony, tension was rising like boiling water. Rick stood near the sleeping dragonlings, his hand resting gently on the head of the blue flame baby. The connection between them, whatever it was, grew, stronger by the minute. Every time the dragonling looked at him, it was like it could see something inside his heart. Syrixa, the dragon mother, stood with her wings curled low. Her eyes didn't blink. She was listening. Then she spoke. "They are not far." Rick turned. "How do you know?" She pointed her claw toward the cold floor. The ice tells me. Their boots shake it, their machines poison the air. Just then, a young worker ran in, pale and sweating. Sir, we picked up 6 heat signatures. Non-human. They're surrounding the east and west gates. Before Rick could speak, the worker added, and they're not answering radio calls, they're just standing there watching. Rick grabbed his jacket. Wake everyone, no one sleeps tonight. That night, the outpost turned into a fortress. Machines were pulled apart to build makeshift turrets. Fuel tanks were shifted to block the gates. The heating systems were turned to full power, not just to keep warm, but to hide life signs. Everyone waited. Inside the engine hall, Serixa sat beside Rick. She looked tired, but focused. Rick asked quietly, "What do they want from you?" Her answer came after a long pause. "My child." Rick glanced at the baby dragon sleeping with blue flames dancing softly from his mouth. "Why him?" Serix's voice turned cold. "Because he is rare. The last of a bloodline that can awaken the cryoflame. The Thraxians don't fear it. They want to control it, to own it." She looked at Rick. "And now they know the fire touched you." Rick stared at his hand. It still tingled from earlier, like something inside him was growing. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed across the colony speakers. 3 slow bangs. Boom, boom, boom. The control room flickered on the screen. Outside the main gate stood a Thraxian commander, tall, covered in bone armor, holding a metal staff. Behind him stood 5 soldiers, still as statues. Then a message crackled in through the old speaker. "Give us the dragons, or burn with them." The entire base held its breath. In the silence, Rick grabbed the mic and replied, "You step 1, foot closer, and I'll bury you under this whole damn station." The Thraxian smiled with sharp teeth. "Then we begin." The enemy pulled back, but Rick knew what that meant. A siege. They wouldn't attack right away. No, they would wait. Cut. Power. Block supplies. Scare the humans. Rick gathered the crew. Everyone had questions. What are they waiting for? Why don't we just hand over the dragons? This isn't our fight. Rick slammed his hand on the table. It became our fight, he said, when a child begged for help and we didn't look away. He looked at the baby dragon. And I don't know what this fire is or why it chose me, but I'm not giving it to monsters. One old engineer nodded. Then we stand with you. One by one, others agreed. Even the guards. That night, humans and dragons shared food, warmth, and fear, but also hope. And in a quiet corner, the baby dragon climbed onto Rick's lap. For the first time, it purred like a cat, and Rick felt a strange warmth in his chest. Outside, the enemy waited in the snow. Inside, a bond grew stronger, and somewhere deep in the stars, something ancient had awakened, something the Thraxians feared more than any weapon. A human, chosen by dragonfire. It began with silence. No gunfire, no shouting, no sounds of battle, only the cold wind blowing through the empty plains outside, the colony gates. Rick stood on the rooftop of the command center, binoculars in hand. His eyes scanned the white wasteland. The sun hadn't risen and the sky was still dark. A faint blue glow hovered just beyond the hills. The Thraxians were still out there, watching, waiting. They're playing with us, Rick said quietly. Beside him, the dragon mother Serixa stood still as stone. Her body was covered in frost again. Her wings had healed a little, but her eyes looked tired, wiser. They want you to break, she said. Fear is their first weapon. Rick nodded. What's the second? She answered without emotion. Fire. By midday, the snow melted, slightly not because of heat, but because of the massive ship that now hovered above the colony. A black vessel the size of a city block blocked out the clouds. Its engines gave off a low hum that shook the buildings. Ice cracked under its pressure. People inside the outpost screamed. Some ran to the bunkers. Others froze, staring through the windows with wide eyes. The Thraxians had brought a warship. Rick entered the main hall, where everyone had gathered. His voice was firm. "They want us scared. Good. That means we're doing something right." Someone shouted from the back. "What can we do against that? We're miners, not soldiers." Rick looked at the room. "Maybe we are, but we're also human. And humans don't run just because something big shows up." Meanwhile, Sarixa sat near the heating vents with her children. The baby with the cryo flame, Kale, lay curled beside her. He wasn't just recovering, he was changing. His scales were shifting to a glowing blue and white. His wings pulsed with energy. Every few minutes he exhaled a soft breath of frost fire that turned nearby tools to crystal. Sarixa watched her son with worry. Rick approached her. "He okay?" She didn't answer right away. "He is awakening faster than expected," she said. "Too fast. The flame is old, ancient. It should take years. But near you." She looked into Rick's eyes. "It moves, like it remembers something." Rick scratched his head. "You keep saying that. What does it mean?" Sarixa lowered her voice. "It means you may have dragon blood in you, or something deeper. Long ago there were humans who stood beside my kind. Not as enemies, not as riders, as equals." Rick blinked. "You're saying this has happened before?" "Once," she whispered. "And the galaxy never forgot." Suddenly the ground shook. The lights flickered. A siren screamed. Boom, boom, boom. The Thraxians had fired the first shot. One of the colony's fuel tanks exploded. Fire and smoke filled the eastern side. Rick ran to the defense tower. "Return fire! Use the turret cannons!" the humans responded. Large mounted guns fired at the attackers hiding behind the hills. But the Thraxians were fast, dodging like shadows. They moved. Without fear, without sound, Sarixa spread her wings and stood tall. "They'll breach soon." Rick looked at the dragonlings. "We need to hide the kids." "No," Sarixa said firmly. "Kale must stay. He is the only thing they want, and if he's taken, all will burn." Rick looked down at Kale. The little dragon was now awake. He stared at Rick, and for the first time spoke. "Don't let them take me." Rick knelt beside him. "They won't." Kale pressed his snout to Rick's chest. A faint blue light passed between them, like a small flame dancing into Rick's heart. And suddenly, Rick felt it, cold and heat at the same time. Strength in his bones, vision in his mind, and something ancient whispering in his ears. He stood up straighter. His body buzzed with power. Not enough to fight an army, but enough to protect one thing: hope. Outside, Thraxian dropships landed. Soldiers marched in. Inside, the humans and dragons prepared for the final stand. Rick shouted, "Seal the doors! Put the young in the vault! Everyone else get ready!" He grabbed a mining torch and strapped it to his back. Sarixa handed him a shard of her own scale, hard as metal, sharp as glass. Rick looked around. Miners stood with hammers, engineers with welding lasers. Even kitchen workers held tools in shaking hands. And in the center, Kale raised his head and let out a roar. A blue flame burst into the sky, sending an ice shockwave that froze the floor and lit the ceiling with light. The Empire had arrived. But this time, they weren't facing just humans. They were facing something far more dangerous, a human with a dragon's heart. The sky turned black with smoke. The ground shook again. The Thraxians were no longer hiding. They were coming in full force. Their war horns echoed through the frozen valley. Their ships landed one by one like falling meteors. Metal claws tore into the snow as Thraxian soldiers marched forward, armored like beasts from hell. Glowing green eyes locked on the human colony. Inside, Foreman Rick stood in front of the sealed gate with nothing but a flame torch on his back and a strange blue glow in his chest. Beside him stood Kale, the baby dragon with cryoflame now fully awake. He was not a scared child anymore. His eyes burned bright with blue fire, and steam poured from his nose with every breath. The colony was quiet. Humans, miners, cooks, engineers, all stood behind Rick. Their tools had become weapons. Fear was still there, but so was something stronger. Unity. The gate blasted open with a boom. The first wave of Thraxians stormed in, expecting panic. Instead, they got fire. Kyle roared and let out a wave of cold blue fire that froze the front line of enemy soldiers into solid ice statues. Their weapons dropped. Their screams were silent. The humans charged. Hammers smashed helmets. Welding lasers burned through armor. Even the old cleaning robot drove into a Thraxian's leg with full speed. Rick moved like never before. His body wasn't just stronger, it was faster. The bond with Kale had awakened something deep inside. He grabbed a metal pole glowing with cryoflame energy and spun it like a staff. Every swing froze whatever it touched. A soldier aimed a plasma rifle at Rick's head. Kale jumped using his wings for the first time. He knocked the attacker back and roasted him mid-air. Rick laughed. "You're getting good at this." In the engine room, Syrixa fought off two elite warriors trying to reach the younger dragonlings. With her claws glowing and her scales shining, she roared louder than thunder. One soldier stabbed her wing, but she didn't stop. Her fire burned through his armor. "You will not take my children," she screamed. The engineer team had built traps from mining tools, heat grenades, blinding sparks, and collapsing tunnels. Thraxians found themselves stuck, falling, or lost in thick smoke. Still, they kept coming. A second group reached the command center. Rick grabbed a heating pipe and swung it like a sword, knocking two enemies aside. But one soldier fired a shock dart into his leg. Rick fell, paralyzed. Kale screamed and rushed forward, jumping onto the soldier's chest. Then, something new happened. Kale's fire turned white, a cold so pure it cracked the walls burst out of his mouth. The soldier froze, then shattered into pieces like glass. Rick slowly sat up. What was that?" Syrixa entered the room. She was bleeding but standing strong. "It was your bond," she said. "He drew from your soul." Rick looked at Kale. "He's not just a dragon." "No," she said. "He's yours, now. And you are his." Outside, the main Thraxian commander stood watching from the ship ramp. He growled in anger. "Why are they winning? They are miners." An officer replied, "They have the cryoflame. And the man." The commander snarled. "Then burn it all." He pressed a button. A giant bomb was launched from the ship, aimed straight at the colony's heart. Rick saw it falling. He whispered, "We can't stop that." Syrixa looked at him. "Yes, you can." She nodded toward Kale. "You two, together." Rick grabbed Kale and ran outside. The bomb was seconds away. He closed his eyes. He didn't pray. He didn't scream. He just held Kyle tight and said, "Let's show them what human and dragon can do." Kyle roared. Their bodies lit up with glowing white-blue light. The cryoflame burst upward like a frozen volcano. It hit the bomb mid-air. The explosion turned into a giant ice flower, silent, beautiful, and deadly. Shards of frozen fire rained down. The Thraxian army stood stunned. The humans cheered. The commander growled, but knew it was over. He gave the order. Retreat. The battle ended not with fire, but with frost. The colony stood tall. Dragons and humans, bloodied but alive, stared at each other and smiled. Rick looked down at Kale. "You saved us," Kale replied, his voice small but proud. "We saved each other." The legend of the frozen flame had returned, not as a weapon, but as a bond, and the galaxy would soon know, when a dragon trusts a human, there is nothing they cannot burn or freeze. The battlefield was silent. Ashes of fire and snowflakes of ice floated together in the air like a storm had passed but left behind something magical. Humans cheered. Dragons roared. But Rick didn't move. He stood in the center of the ruined courtyard, holding Kale in his arms. The baby dragon was breathing, slow, steady. But something inside him was glowing brighter than ever before. Syrixa stepped forward, her wings torn, her body bruised but her eyes full of pride. "He has awakened it." Rick looked up. The cryo-flame? She shook her head slowly. No. Something even older. Something long forgotten. Rick felt it too. A hum beneath his skin. A whisper in the back of his mind. Visions of stars, of burning skies, of dragonkind, flying beside armored humans across alien worlds. The past, or the future. Later that night, Rick stood alone outside the base. The storm had cleared. Above him, the stars were brighter than ever. Kale sat beside him, staring up too. Rick spoke softly. What happened to us back there? That was more than just fire. Kale's small voice answered, clear but deep for his age. It was the first flame, the ancient bond, waking again. Rick looked down. How do you know? Kale blinked. Because I saw it, in your memory. You've seen it too, haven't you? Rick nodded. Yes, he had. Dreams, visions, of a time where humans and dragons fought not against each other but together. Armies of flame and steel. Great wars against shadowy creatures. A forgotten alliance. One name kept echoing. The Flame Keeper. Syrixa joined them, walking slowly. I knew it, she said, eyes locked on Rick. You are not just a man. You are the last blood of the Flame Keepers. Rick frowned. That doesn't make sense. I'm just a foreman, a guy who fixes machines. No, Syrixa said. You are more. Your ancestors once made a vow to protect the cryo flame. That bond passes through blood and time, and now it has returned. Inside the colony, something strange began to happen. The snow around the outpost melted in perfect circles. Machines powered down, but then powered back on without fuel. Walls shimmered, with frost but didn't freeze. Kyle walked through the halls, and everywhere he passed, metal glowed with soft blue lines. It was like the colony itself was waking up to something alive. The people noticed. He's doing something. Is that magic? No, Rick said quietly, watching. It's memory. Suddenly, alarms beeped again. A message had arrived, but not from Earth. It came from deep space. A satellite had picked up a signal, one that hadn't been heard in thousands of years. It repeated a simple message, over and over. Flamekeeper awakened. Phase 1 complete. Initiating Flameborn protocol. Rick stared at the screen. Syrixa's voice was grave. They heard it. Who? Rick asked. She turned toward the stars. The others. The ones who buried the cryo flame. The ones who feared it. Rick's chest tightened. They'll come for us. Yes, she said. But not just enemies. Allies too. Many have waited for the signal. You are not alone anymore. That night, Rick dreamed again. But this time, it wasn't just a vision, it was a memory. He stood in ancient armor shoulder to shoulder with a giant silver dragon. Galaxies burned behind them. A dark army of shadows marched from the edge of space, and then Rick, the past version of him, raised his hand. The Flamekeeper's mark lit the sky. Dragons and humans charged together, and the universe shook. Rick awoke with a gasp. Kale sat beside him, wings wrapped around him like a blanket. Syrixa stood by the door. Now you know, she said. Rick nodded. This wasn't just about saving you. No, she said. This was about restarting something bigger. In the morning, Rick gathered everyone. He told them everything. The visions, the Flamekeeper legacy, the signal sent to the stars. Expected fear, but instead one voice rose from the back. So what now? Rick smiled. Now, he said. We train. We rebuild. We get ready. Ready for what? Rick looked to the sky. For who comes next? The cryoflame had returned. The Flamekeeper had awakened, and across the galaxy, forces both ancient and powerful had heard the call. Some would come to destroy. Some would come to serve. But all would know. The fire had risen again. The wind on Karen 7 had changed. It no longer howled with hunger. It whispered. Snow no longer fell in violence. It drifted like soft feathers from the sky. The sun, weak and silver, peeked through the clouds for the first time in years. Something deep had shifted in the bones of this frozen world. Inside the human outpost, now half damaged and half rebuilt, Foreman Rick stood with his hand resting on the head of young Kale, the dragonling now glowing with soft white-blue fire. A week had passed since the Thraxians were defeated and their ship driven away. But peace, Rick knew, wouldn't last, because of the signal, because of the flame. That morning the ground shivered again. But this time it wasn't an attack. A new ship broke through the clouds, sleek, silver, designed with curves like wings. The colonies. Scanners had no record of it. Rick, Sirixa, and the remaining crew watched from the gates as the ship landed without a sound. No weapons, no armies, just silence. Then the ramp lowered, and from it stepped a woman, human, but not Earth human. She wore armor that shimmered with moving light. Her skin was golden, her eyes dragon-slit. She walked with purpose, and behind her followed two creatures. One, a young man, glowing faintly blue. The other, an elder dragon with crystal horns and golden wings. Sirixa gasped. The Flameborn. Rick blinked. Who? The woman stopped just in front of him and bowed her head. You don't know me, Flamekeeper, she said, voice calm like water. But your fire woke us. Rick looked around. I didn't mean to wake anyone. Just tried to save a mother and her children. She smiled gently. That's what makes you worthy. Her name was Lady Aurelian, the last of the old protectors. She explained the truth. Thousands of years ago, dragons and humans had indeed fought together. The cryoflame wasn't a weapon, it was a soul bond, passed through kindness, courage, and trust. But empires feared it. They hunted the Flamekeepers, betrayed the dragons, split their alliance. Now only whispers and legends remained. Until Rick lit the bond again with Kale. You didn't just save a family, Aurelian said. You reignited a forgotten hope. The colony was no longer a backwater outpost. It was a beacon. Other dragons began to appear, hiding for generations, now drawn by Kale's signal. Human outcasts, too, those who had always felt different, discovered they shared old Flamekeeper blood. Even the ground around the colony changed. Plants that had never grown on Karen 7 began to rise from the snow. The cryoflame wasn't just fire, it was life energy. The planet was healing. Rick sat alone one evening by the old crater where the Thraxian bomb had been stopped. Kyle lay beside him, bigger now, with wings stretching twice as wide, and voice deeper. You okay? Kyle asked. Rick chuckled. A dragon's asking me if I'm okay. That's new. Kyle nudged his shoulder. You don't talk as much lately. Rick nodded slowly. I'm just thinking. About what? Rick stared into the sky. About how a simple man became something he never wanted to be. Kale tilted his head. You didn't want to be a hero. Rick smiled, but his eyes were heavy. I wanted to fix machines, drink hot coffee, sleep in on Sundays, not lead dragons and face warships. Kyle was quiet. Then he said, But you didn't run. Rick looked at him. No, he said. I didn't. The next day, Lady Aurelian made an offer. Come with us, she said. There are other colonies, other dragons, some still hiding, some still hunted. She looked at Kale. There are even others like him, and they'll need someone who understands the bond. Rick looked around at his people, miners who had turned warriors, engineers who had built shields from scrap, survivors who now believed in fire and legend. I can't leave them, he said. Aurelian shook her head. We're not asking you to leave. We're asking you to lead. And so, the new Flameborn colony was created, not just for humans, not just for dragons, but for all species who believed in freedom, fire, and family. They built new homes with open skies and deep chambers for winged kind. They crafted schools where fire was studied like science. And Rick? He became something more than just leader. He became a teacher. He taught others how to bond with dragons, not through control, not through fear, but through compassion. Years passed. Kale grew large enough to fly across the planet in a single breath. But he always returned to Rick's side. Syrixa watched her children become protectors of this new world. Lady Aurelian helped build a galactic message system, calling others to join the Flameborn. The Thraxians never came back. But Rick knew. Others would. There are always those who fear what they don't understand. But this time the world wouldn't face it alone. One final night, Rick stood on the hill again, Kyle beside him. "You still dream of leaving?" Kyle asked. Rick shook his head. "I already left. I just never thought I'd find something better than Earth." Kyle smiled. "Because you didn't just find a planet, you found your purpose." Rick laughed. "I thought that was just an old man's job." Kale stretched his wings. "You're not old. You're glowing." Rick blinked. "What?" He looked down. His chest, the mark of the cryoflame, was pulsing brighter than ever. In the sky above, new stars began to blink. Ships, more ships, coming closer. Rick took a breath. "Looks like we've got company." Kale stood tall. "Then let's welcome them home." And so it began. From a frozen mining base to a star-wide legend. From a man and a dragon to a future forged in fire, frost, and friendship. This was not the end. It was only the first flame of many.